Hi everyone, we're so glad that you've joined us at the Center for Brain Health for our event. Let's get started with a brief video underscoring the importance of brain health for you and for society. After that, we'll introduce our speaker.
We work, we live, we innovate and create. At the center of it all is your brain health. The ability to solve problems, think analytically, share empathy, and thrive.
We're trying to make brain performance really the next fitness revolution.
So how do you boost brain power? Welcome to the Brain Health Project, an urgent call to transform your mind to work stronger and faster.
This is an absolute crisis, as great as any we have ever faced. We have to equip the minds and brains of our citizens to cope with the accelerating, dizzying rate of change that they face in their lives.
Your brain health is not fixed. Scientific discoveries prove it can adapt and grow regardless of your starting point.
Our greatest value, the asset that will help us to change everything, every problem we're in, is all in our head.
To harness that treasure, we must measure and monitor progress while things are going well, versus waiting for an injury or disease to strike.
Too many of us are outliving our brains, and that does not have to be the case.
The information age is bombarding us with more content than our human brains can handle. How do you keep from getting lost in this? And focus on deep thinking. For starters, stop multitasking.
Science shows us that multitasking is bad for your brain. It reduces fluid intelligence, causes brain atrophy, and increases chronic stress.
The global pandemic is creating more stress than ever, stress that leads to depression and anxiety and beyond. Unlocking our potential to navigate these hurdles starts with learning the right strategies, even in school.
So when teachers have these strategies, they're empowered to support our learners, and then the learners are now able to take ownership of their learning.
Training kids how to think is doubling academic achievement among middle schoolers.
I think the greatest national security threat is pre-K through 12. If we don't take care of educating our young men and women, then we have to ask ourselves, where are we going to be in 20 years?
Our world-renowned scientists know you can increase your brain health, not lose it. It's time for a new category of health, brain health. You are a game changer. Ready to transform the world with us? Be a part of the brain health revolution. It starts here.
Welcome everybody. Welcome to the last in our spring series of Brain Health Presents here at Center for Brain Health. And we are ending the spring series with a bang, for sure, with Team Sherzai, and Jen is going to introduce the good doctors here in just a minute. We could not be more excited to have them with us. But I wanted to start by first thanking Ann and Charles Eisman, who have sponsored tonight's presentation. As we've said, throughout the series, we are a not-for-profit. And let me make sure is my video still up? There we are. Sorry, it disappeared for a second. And they've been active members and active contributors here at Brain Health since 2012. And they've had a long history of supporting collaboration, and that's exactly what we're doing tonight by bringing the Sherzais to you as our presenters. And we really have hit the nail on the head, I think, this spring with bringing true experts in the field, true people of influence, people who not just align with what we're doing, but are additive to what we're doing. We're not the only people out there talking about brain health. We know we're all on our own brain health journey, and the Sherzais have their own view and their own perspective, and they're doing some really cool things to support brain health. So again, thank you to Ann and Charles, and I'll turn it over to Jen Zients, our Deputy Director here, to introduce our fabulous guest tonight.
So welcome everybody. As many of you probably know, BrainHealth Presents is designed to bring some of the cutting edge, newest research findings within the field of neuroscience to the public so that we are able to make it actionable and to make it understandable and translatable. And so I want to remind everybody, I know everyone's going to have hot questions tonight. So please put them in the Q&A, utilize the Q&A. We're going to get to as many of those as we can toward the end of the evening. We're really so delighted to have our guests tonight. And I think before we get started, we're going to have 2 poll questions. And so as our team gets ready to pull those up, here we go. So everyone can just answer on your computer. How knowledgeable are you about what you can do to take care of your brain health? Very knowledgeable, somewhat knowledgeable, or not at all knowledgeable? Great, then we're gonna everyone's gonna learn a lot tonight. All right, and here's our second question. What is your biggest obstacle to caring for your brain health in your day-to-day life? I don't know where to start. No time, you're too busy. I don't think anything will help. I don't have an issue with my brain health. I don't know what really works and what's a gimmick. Or there are no obstacles. I can't wait. Okay. This is awesome. You guys are going to be so happy that you're here tonight. We could not be more honored, more excited to have with us tonight the award-winning neurology and research team, Team Sherzai, Dr. Ayesha and Dr. Dean Sherzai. Both of them, individually and together, are incredible powerhouses of knowledge, experience, and heart, revolutionizing public health, empowering patients, empowering communities, driving large-scale behavioral change, shifting population expectations, addressing health disparities, all through the translation of science. The National Academy of Medicine recently awarded them for their innovative work in community brain health in the African American population. And this is just one of the areas that they work in. They are authors, so you should definitely look them up on Amazon. And they have a podcast, The Brain Health Revolution, so you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts. They are accomplishing massive, massive goals with what I know to be true, massive, massive heart. And so thank you both so much for being here with us tonight. We cannot wait to listen and to learn and to engage, and it is all yours.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, Stephen, Sandy, who's not here with us today. We're so honored to be here to speak with you all about something that Dean and I are very passionate about, which is brain health, and more about the translation of what we know into community. So thank you so much for having us, and a big hello to all of our wonderful audience members for joining us this evening to talk about brain health. Thank you so much for being here. All right, so we have a PowerPoint presentation that we'd like to share with you all. Let me just go ahead and start putting that up, and we can have a conversation.
Fabulous. So we're talking about the most important organ that we have, the brain. We are our brain. The evolution of information has brought us to a point where we realize that this little 2-pound organ, 3-pound organ, which is 2% of our body's weight, which consumes 25% of our body's energy at any one point, is actually who we are at any one moment and at any one point. And it does incredible work for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years or more. Yeah. And it does it amazingly. And it keeps that stream of consciousness through those 87 billion neurons and 1 quadrillion connections. And we need to preserve it. We need to help it because it does its job. It does its job well. It does its job under incredible stressful situations, environments, traumas, and it does as well. And we just have to do a little bit to help it out. And our work for the last 18 years since we first got in, we met each other, was around this concept where Our first conversation was about our grandparents, yes. Two of our grandparents each who died from Alzheimer's, and our journey started there. And we hope that we can get the population, at least a fair large number of population, to follow the green line. This is not an absolute representation. It's supposed to depict what happens to our brain health and our brain aging process in the standard way that we live now. And if for a great number, not everybody, for a large number of people, if we do the right things as far as environmental and lifestyle factors, we can potentially live a brain healthy life, which is the green line, which we can continue to maintain attention, focus, memory, and cognition well into our 80s, 90s, and beyond. And we have many examples of those kind of people. But before we get to that point, we have to talk about the tsunami ahead of us, the tsunami that's affecting 1 in 64 people every second, 6.2 million Americans today, more than 45 million people worldwide. It's the 5th leading cause of mortality, morbidity in the United States, number 1 in Japan and the United States. And this epidemic is growing. This epidemic is growing rapidly. After the age of 65, 1 in 10 individuals suffer from Alzheimer's, and that number doubles every 10 years until at age 85, nearly 50% are suffering from Alzheimer's. Before we go on, Alzheimer's is one of the category of dementias. Dementia is the big category, which stands for cognitive decline that is to the extent where it's affecting people's ability to take care of their daily activities. Maybe they're driving, maybe their finances, maybe their ability to cook or answer phone calls, or all of the above. That's dementia, but there are many types. Alzheimer's is the most common type. 60 to 70% of all dementias is Alzheimer's. These numbers are going to grow rapidly. By 2050, nearly 16 million or more. By 2050, the direct cost will be 1.1 trillion. Right now, it's the costliest disease in America. The second costliest is heart disease at 120 billion. Dementia or Alzheimer's, direct and indirect cost is $500 billion. Direct cost is $355 billion. These numbers are astronomical. And the human cost is even more great. And we've seen it in our own lives, in our patients' lives. And we hope to make a difference in curbing this tsunami. There are some disparities, some differences. Through our normal life, 1 in 6 women suffer from Alzheimer's and dementia in general, and 1 in 11 men. And it's not just because women live a little longer. It's more than that. It's more complex than that. And we're beginning to learn the hormonal component, the vascular component, and other immunological diseases that differ between the two genders and how they might be affecting the outcome as well. And that's important to study because women live longer, and we have a much larger proportion of Alzheimer's patients, 2/3 that are women, and we have to understand that. And this disparity also continues in other populations such as African American and Hispanic, which are 2 times. Again, in both of those, it's not genetic. It's more lifestyle and environmental factors that seem to be contributing more than anything else. Speaking of the genetics, which always comes up, yes, like every other disease, like everything else in a human perspective, even behavioral components have a genetic component, but the genetics vary. In certain diseases, genes have 100% penetrance, meaning if you have these genes, you'll get the disease. An example of that is Huntington's disease. If a person has that anomaly on chromosome 4, it's almost guaranteed that we know when they're going to develop it. That kind of 100% penetrance only accounts for 3 to 5% of all Alzheimer's, meaning the rest of Alzheimer's, 90 to 95%, is a combination of genes and environment. The next highest prevalence or penetrance gene is ApoE4, which some of you might know about. ApoE4, if you have one gene from one parent, your risk goes up 4 times. If you have 2, 1 for each parent, your risk goes up 12 times. So about 2% of population have both genes. So does that mean that they will all develop Alzheimer's? No, 50% doesn't. And that plus the fact that ApoE4 is a gene that codes for a protein that is involved in cholesterol and fat transport should give us a clue that it's more than just genetic. It's the epigenetics, it's the environmental factors that have contribution. And the other genes are same. It has to do with inflammation. It has to do with disposal of waste. It has to do with energetics. So all of these are not genetic specifically for Alzheimer's, but lifestyle components and environmental factors interplay with genes that develop outcome. So yeah.
As far as information about curbing this tsunami is concerned, as you might know, there have been decades of research on finding a treatment. But recently, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, we've learned more and more about the profound effect of lifestyle factors on brain health and in the prevention of Alzheimer's disease. And we're so happy that it's now becoming more and more mainstream. Alzheimer's Association was talking about it, and we have so much data that shows that when people live a healthy lifestyle, they can reduce their risk of dementia. For example, this particular study where they looked at a pool of population, people who had the genetic risk for developing Alzheimer's disease, and they found that their risk of developing Alzheimer's went up by 60% if they had the genes. However, on top of the bad genes, if they had an unhealthy lifestyle, their risk of developing the disease went up by 360%. That's a huge number. But then the same pool of people, if they had a healthy lifestyle, their risk of dementia was less than 30%. And this gives us a clue of how important healthy lifestyle is, and that adherence to this kind of a healthy lifestyle can offset genetic risk. Another study that was wonderful by Dr. Donna, and this was published in the Journal of Neurology, they looked at healthy lifestyle factors and risk of Alzheimer's dementia in 2 very large populations, the Chicago Health and Aging Project and Rush Memory and Aging Project. And they created a score, a risk score, where they looked at diet, which was the MIND diet, and I'll talk about that soon, exercise, smoking cessation, and cognitive engagement, or keeping one's mind active. And they found out that compared to people who did not adhere to any of these lifestyle factors, or at least one of them, those who adhere to 2 or 3 had a 37% lower risk of developing Alzheimer's, and those who adhere to 4 or 5 of them reduced their risk by 60%. And that's great news because it shows that it's not an all or none phenomenon. Every small little change that we make in our lifestyle towards a healthier lifestyle makes a huge difference as far as risk of developing Alzheimer's is concerned. And another study, which is actually ongoing, called the FINGER study, or the Finnish geriatric study, looked at a comprehensive and a multifaceted lifestyle intervention, which included nutrition counseling, exercise, cognitive training, and management of vascular risk factors like having high blood pressure, managing cholesterol, managing diabetes or prediabetes, or even insulin resistance. And they found out that the comprehensive nature of application of lifestyle made a huge difference, and it reduced their risk of dementia and also improved their cognition in many, many ways.
So with that, we looked at the studies and did several reviews looking at what are the underlying factors that actually might contribute to disease downstream. We have to say that we now know that the disease, be it Alzheimer's or many of the other dementias, don't start at the point when you first develop memory problems. They start 10, 20, 30 years earlier. And the processes that actually contribute to those are inflammation, oxidation, glucose dysregulation, and lipid dysregulation. And it's not always one or the other, it's usually a combination. So you've heard people talk about Alzheimer's as in a type 3 diabetes or lipid disorder. Yes, it could be. If you have a uncontrolled cholesterol levels, there are many studies that show that people who have higher levels of cholesterol, their risk goes up as much as 53%, 57%. And the same thing with glucose. We even looked at insulin resistance, which is pre-diabetes, in an NHANES study, and we saw that the risk actually goes up as far as cognitive decline is concerned. And same thing with inflammation. So these factors are the contributors. So what contributes to abatement or slowing down this process are 5-fold: nutrition, exercise, a stress management or unwind, restorative sleep, and optimizing mental activity. Within nutrition, we've also included a reduction or abatement of alcohol and abatement of cigarette smoking. And so that's within those 5 areas that you can significantly reduce the risk of Alzheimer's and many of the dementias. So with that, we came up with a bit of a self-serving acronym: NEURO, N for nutrition, E for exercise, U for unwind, R for restorative sleep, not just sleep, but restorative sleep, and O for optimizing mental and social activity. All
right. So it's almost impossible to go into the depth of each and every element of lifestyle, but we thought it would be important for us to touch on some of the important evidence that has come up in the last few years that shows us the importance of these factors. So I'd like to share a couple of slides with you as far as nutrition is concerned. Now, food is the most important internal environment. It's something that we put in our bodies, and it determines the building blocks of our brain and the rest of the body. They can protect us from oxidative stress by reducing the production of free radicals, and these are oxidative substances that can damage neurons and the connections between the neurons or brain cells. They can reduce inflammation. Inflammation is one of the main reasons for damage of the cells and brain dysfunction. And we're focusing on dietary patterns instead of superfoods. I mean, you probably have heard a lot about blueberries or green tea or this or that, and people are selling a lot of supplements, kind of, show that there are particular superfoods that help with brain health. But we're shying away from that. Scientists are shying away from that because you don't eat one food at a time, you eat multiple foods, and it's the synergy between these food products that matter more than anything else. So scientists are looking at dietary patterns when it comes to brain health. Now, just some examples of the studies that have come to us over the many years that show the importance of diet and brain health. This study actually showed that when people have high cholesterol related to diet, they increase their risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by 57%. And even if their cholesterol was borderline high, it increased the risk of Alzheimer's by 23%. This is a study from Women's Health Study from Harvard University, where they looked at 6,000 women followed for 4 years. When they consumed high saturated fats, they had a very fast decline in their memory by 70% compared to women who consumed polyunsaturated fats or monounsaturated fats. And their brain functions were 6 years younger compared to those who consumed saturated fats. This is a very important study, the Rush University Memory and Aging Project, where they looked at the MIND diet. Now, the MIND diet stands for Mediterranean Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. It's a hybrid diet that looks at Mediterranean diet and DASH diet, or dietary approach to stop hypertension. These are patterns that have been put together, and they have very specific constructs. And what it basically shows, and I'll show you later, is eating more vegetables and fruits and limiting sources of saturated fats. And they found that when people adhered to this kind of a dietary pattern, it resulted in a 53% reduction in risk of Alzheimer's. 53%. And this is just diet, not adjusted, not including any other factors like exercise, stress, and sleep. And even moderate adherence reduced the risk by 35%. And when people consumed the most, or they were in the highest tier of adherence, they had cognitive functioning equivalent to a person who was 7.5 years younger. So not only did they delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease, they actually had better functioning brains. Insulin resistance is another concept that we could talk for hours about, and it basically means that brain cells are unable to take glucose in as a fuel in the brain, and we've written about it. And this is the pre-diabetes stage. A lot of people have insulin resistance and they never carry the diagnosis of diabetes, but even having abnormal glucose metabolism increases the risk for Alzheimer's disease. And people in this particular study that we published had lower cognitive state, which means that they had lower processing, they had poor function, executive function when it came to their state of insulin resistance. So it's important to be aware of these things, and it's very important to have a better understanding of our glucose metabolism. So what is a Mediterranean diet? When you parse it out and when you look at the diet's construct, it's essentially a scoring system. People are given high score and low score. You get high scores when you eat vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts and seeds, legumes like beans and lentils, mono and polyunsaturated fats from seeds and nuts, and extra virgin olive oil, and sources of omega fats, whether they're fish or from plants like flax seeds and chia seeds. And you get a low score when you're consuming sources of saturated fats, so meat, poultry, dairy, and other sources of saturated fats like coconut oil, believe it or not. So when you look at the totality of dietary patterns from different kinds of studies that have come to us, it's essentially a variation of the same theme. And the theme is eating more unprocessed foods, more plant-forward diets, eating more mono and polyunsaturated fats that are derived from plants, plant-based proteins like lentils, beans, soy products like tofu and tempeh, complex carbohydrates, not just all carbohydrates. You know, you keep on hearing that carbohydrates are bad, but not all of them are. Complex carbohydrates that come from, say, things like fruits and vegetables or whole grains, and even in nuts are very important. And it's the main source of energy for brain health. The focus should be on increasing more and more fiber because it actually helps with, you know, developing stronger neural processes. And specifically extra virgin olive oil, that is a component of the Mediterranean diet, seems to be healthy because of its polyphenols and other anti-inflammatory products. So that was a summary of the diet. Let's talk about exercise. I think we can talk about exercise for days. Again, it's such a fascinating subject, but we now know that, you know, just a walk around the park or being on your feet is probably not enough. You actually have to get a little tired. You have to break a sweat and have a regimented exercise program on a daily basis. Why? Because of several factors that have been documented. The concept of neuroplasticity essentially means that our brain and brain connections between the cells, they grow, they continue to grow throughout our life. And exercise boosts that process. How does it boost? It boosts it by better brain circulation, increased blood supply, and also the creation or production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a growth hormone that is responsible for making more and more connections. Each cell, the neurons can have as little as 2 connections between each other, or as many as 30,000 connections. And these can happen throughout our life, whether we're 5 years old, 55, or 95. So exercise literally grows our brain. It also reduces insulin resistance, which means that your glucose metabolism is better when you exercise. And it significantly reduces depression, anxiety, attention deficit disorders, and it reduces the prevalence of vascular neurodegenerative diseases, vascular diseases like stroke, and neurodegenerative, of course, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and others. There's one study that was fascinating that showed the importance of strength training. So the question comes up, is cardio better than strength training? Which one should we do more? It's actually both, but more resistance training. In this study, they looked at 2 groups. One group was subjected to 2 to 3 times a week for 6 months of resistance training program. And the other group was only stretching and, you know, doing very light exercises. And they both had mild cognitive impairment, which is a pre-Alzheimer's state. Now, the group that was exposed to resistance training, 47% of the participants actually achieved normal cognitive scores after the intervention. So they were able to reverse some of the damage. And particularly when they looked at the types of exercises, greater leg strength was extremely effective at improving cognitive performance. So we shouldn't be skipping leg days because it makes sense. Our legs have the biggest muscles and they also help with better blood flow to the brain. So in summary, being involved in regular, moderate to strenuous activity grows the brain. Sedentary behavior nullifies the benefit of strenuous exercise. So we have to be moving most of the time. Leg strength is associated with a bigger brain, specifically the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for memory consolidation. Engaging in strength training at least twice a week, in vigorous cardio exercises at least 3 to 4 times a week, and most importantly, having a regimented continuous dose of exercise is very important, not just, you know, exercise one day and not exercise for the rest of the week. All right, let's talk about stress.
So stress is an incredibly important topic all the time, but especially since in the last 2 years, the whole planet's been going through a tremendous amount of stress, and stress can be profoundly destructive. And there are many different pathways, but 2 pathways is the limbic hypothalamic pituitary pathway, where the message that goes from your limbic system, from your emotional brain, sends a different message to the hypothalamus and actually affects the pituitary, which is hormone central. And that affects your growth, your sexuality, your immune system, your glucose metabolism, your metabolism in general. Every system in your body is affected just by how you perceive stress. The second system is the autonomic system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. Sympathetic system, which is the dominant system, it's the background survival system that we've had for millennia, and it's the system that deals with fight or flight. It's survival. Your body cares about survival more than thriving. So it actually puts that in precedence. It puts that ahead of everything else. Now, for most of our time, we needed to worry about bears and tigers and maybe starvation. And those would come in quick cycles and go away. And the body could adapt to it. In fact, it was beneficial. Now, But today we've created the art of language. Language actually names things and carries it with you. And that becomes a chronic stress with you. That chronic stress creates this indolent mechanism where your inflammatory markers, your immune system, everything is affected at low grade for a persistent period of time. And that can be profoundly destructive. So as you got the clue at the beginning, how you interpret this is important. So there is such a thing as good stress and bad stress. In fact, one of the most important things that helps this brain grow is good stress. There's a reason. The reason this brain exists is to be challenged and to have the good stress. And that's because it wants to think, it wants to be challenged, it wants to distill the environment, understand what the environment is, capture environment to increase its survival, which means it wants to live around its purpose. It wants to be pushed. That's good stress. Let me be a little more specific. Good stress is the kind of information, activity, and behavior and emotions that are driven by your purpose, is more time-bound, has clear victories, clear timelines, and that creates the kind of push that actually grows the brain. It also is the foundation of your emotions over a long period of time, which is the sadness, happiness, joy, and anxiety, and all of those things. It has to do with how you interpret good stress and how much you're involved in good stress, which is your purpose-driven, challenging life. Bad stress is the opposite. It doesn't have clear directions. It doesn't have clear timelines. It's not driven by your purpose. And it just is this indolent, uncomfortable state that creates this metabolic process that we described earlier. And that actually damages the brain pretty much more than anything else. So the key is to identify clearly your good stressors and bad stressors and work systematically in reducing, delegating, and eliminating the bad stress, increasing, empowering, and tooling the good stress. And the best way to do that, and we've done this multiple groups, is make lists, specific lists, not general. I don't like my work is not specific enough. I don't like memo writing. That's a specific thing. And you work towards reducing, eliminating, delegating, and increasing the good stressors in your life. And the third thing is the language that you occupy with the stressors that you can't control is important. The positive language truly, definitely define your emotional state and what happens to you in your body. Those are good 3 places to start with stress.
Amazing. So let's talk about restorative sleep. Now, sleep is probably one of the most important times during the day, even though we're completely unconscious and we're knocked out for about 7 to 8 hours. Why? Because of 2 very important functions. The first one is cleansing of the brain through a very well-developed, sophisticated janitorial system. And the second function is consolidation and organization of our memories. Now, during the sleep stages, this is what our sleep architecture looks like. We go through multiple cycles, 4 or 5 cycles of sleep, where we basically vary going from REM stage to stage 1, 2, 3, and then back to REM over and over again. During the deepest stages of sleep, which is N3, is when a very sophisticated system gets activated, the janitorial system. It's also called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system is made out of a particular type of fluid and specialized cells, microglia, that go around the brain and they start picking up the debris and the byproducts. And when people don't reach this N3 stage of sleep, they never activated that janitorial system, and therefore over time, there is accumulation of debris and toxic byproducts that end up resulting in neurodegeneration and vascular damage to the brain. That's why people who don't have good sleep and they have sleep issues, they tend to have more memory problems, whether it's an acute stage, say, for example, not getting enough sleep overnight or over 2 or 3 days, they tend to have focus and attention problems. But long-term, they have accumulation of amyloid beta protein, which is the bad protein associated with Alzheimer's disease. But there's a lot of solution to it. So I don't want this to be like a scary talk or anything. There's a lot of things that we can do to improve our sleep cycles and sleep structure. One of the most important things that gets overlooked, whether it's in a doctor's clinic or in public health realms, is the epidemic of sleep apnea. Now, sleep apnea is a condition where the soft tissues in the back of our throat, they block our airway and we're not able to breathe. And that could happen for multiple reasons. It could be genetic. It could be related to metabolic diseases, high blood pressure, diabetes, being overweight, things of that nature. And sleep apnea has been associated with increased risk of stroke, some cardiovascular diseases like heart disease, depression, anxiety, headaches, obesity. And in one study from University of Florida, they showed that untreated sleep apnea increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease by 70%. And it makes sense. When people have sleep apnea, they first of all don't get a proper sleep, so there's accumulation of byproducts, and second, it can actually cause vascular damage into the brain. The treatment is obviously with CPAP machine and multiple other means. It reverses this risk, but it's a very grossly underreported condition, and it's overlooked, and it's very important for us to have more conversations around it. Now let's talk about optimize or mental activity.
So mental activity is incredibly important. It creates what's called cognitive reserve. It's the connectivity that Ayesha was talking about earlier. And it starts very early, but we have control over it throughout our life. There are many studies, but these are the, one of the interesting studies was the London taxi driver study. This is before GPS, where taxi drivers were compared to bus drivers. Bus drivers had a routine route, which didn't involve much memorizing, but taxi drivers had to learn the circuitous path, which London is, if anybody's been to London.
We put a little bit of an example right
there.
Yeah,
it's not an easy place to traverse. So they had to memorize all of this.
And you know what the test was called? The test was called the knowledge.
The knowledge.
Yes.
Yes. And they did imaging studies before and after, and neuropsychological studies before and after. And what they saw was that people who were involved in taxi driving or studying for it, they actually grew certain parts of the brain, specifically the memory part, which is the hippocampus, and their neuropsychological test scores got better. So, and that was a remarkable thing to see that at any age we can actually do that. The nun study is another very interesting study where these nuns actually dedicated their time, their diaries, their body, their brain after they passed away, and all the necessary tests. And what they saw was for a group of them, there was profound, after they died, there was profound pathology of Alzheimer's and pathology of the brain, vascular and degenerative and otherwise. But yet during life, right before that, they were normal. For others, another group, there was not much pathology, yet they had succumbed to Alzheimer's. What was the difference? So looking at all the biomarkers, what they found was the difference was in their diaries, the language, the complexity of the language, the vocabulary. That was the difference. How they live their life as far as cognitive environment is what's important. So keeping your brain challenged and involved is critical. We did a meta-analysis a couple of years ago, and what we found was working around complexity, purpose, and challenge is central. These sound like soft concepts. They're not. Purpose means the thing that you chose, that you wanted to do in your life, be it learning a musical instrument, be it learning a new language, running a company, whatever it is, that's your purpose. Complexity means involving multiple domains of your brain. Yes, Sudoku is great, although I hate Sudoku, but that's my own thing. But playing a guitar is much better, or doing complex multi-domain activities that involve multiple aspects of your brain is much more important. And challenge means if you get to one level, don't just stop there, push it to the next level. I've been stuck at a couple of songs with 3 chords for 20 years now, Aish, and it's time to move on to 4 chords or 5 chords, pushing it to the next level, challenging yourself. And nobody knows that better than you, because you know, and only you know where the next level is without failing, but just enough push that makes those connections, that connects those millions and millions of neurons, billions of neurons at multiple levels. And this is incredibly protective for brain health. So our work is around translating this. One of the things that came up was people are worried about gimmicks. There are a lot of gimmicks. If anybody's selling you vitamin concoction, it's a gimmick. If somebody's selling you one thing or one kind of diet or it's a gimmick. It's about a comprehensive approach that starts in your home. It's about eating more plants. If you can't do anything else, adding 2 servings of greens in your life is magical.
Absolutely.
Why is there nobody pushing greens? Because there's no money to be made except Popeye, maybe. 11 years longer and healthier than everybody else. Greater greens you eat. And that also affects your brain. So changing your diet to be more plant-centered, making a life that's more movement-oriented, and creating stress management tools in your home, be it meditation, mindfulness, and this other technique that we taught about, identifying the stressors and reducing them. sleep hygiene, which helps with sleep and restorative sleep, and mental activity building around your purpose, 2 or 3 activities that push you along. We say, don't retire, rewire, find new passions, take classes that you would never have taken otherwise. Those are the things that are not nominal. Those are profound and important, that can completely change your life. And if you take care of your brain health, you've taken care of all health.
Absolutely.
And that's our work in the communities, where we go to the communities and bring up these projects. And we actually focus on the behavioral aspects. There's a lot of academic ways of just throwing things at people. But if you don't meet people where they are, and you don't have a system of empowering them to bring them into their life, bring this lifestyle into their life, we're actually causing more harm and more stress. So that's our passion, and we think that's our gift.
These are our books, the Alzheimer's Solution and the 30-Day Alzheimer's Solution, that we're proud of. We offer, I actually went to culinary school during my training at New York. So I'm a cook, I'm a chef. I'd be at Columbia University, studying up for vascular neurology. And then I took some classes in cooking, and I'm very passionate about showing people that they can eat very healthy, very delicious foods as well. We'd be happy to stay in touch with you. We're Sherzai MD on social media. We're the Brain Dogs. Happy to connect with you all if you have any questions. I think we're done a little earlier than we wanted to, but this is great because we can leave more time for some Q&A if the audience has some questions and comments.
This is the shortest talk we've ever done.
We wanted to make sure we interact with everyone. I flew through some of the nutrition slides because I wanted to make sure that it doesn't get overwhelming. But yes, happy to take a deep dive if anybody wants to. Thank you so much for listening.
Well, no, thank you guys, because I'll tell you, I'm glad you ended a little early because there are tons and tons of questions. So this is going to be really exciting.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
Yeah. I'm ready to ask my first set of questions, Steve, unless you've got something you want to ask.
I always like to exercise my right to ask a question or two at the beginning, so I am going to do that. And it really is fascinating because that's why I love doing what we do, is because I learn something every day, and I learned again tonight. So thank you for that. And when I think of, we talk about complexity, I loved the Venn diagram of complexity, purpose, and challenge. And it sounds so trite, right? We talked a little bit before it went on. How do you really quantify that, right? What research led you to that Venn diagram? Because people hear that and I think they go, well, that sounds good, right? That sounds good.
Yeah.
What we're finding out is so many things that sounded good are actually good for your brain, and you can prove it through neural change and through research. So where did those 3 buckets come from? Because I think I love threes. Threes are easy to memorize. So where did that come from?
But I love the way you framed that. But everything that sounds good isn't always good, though. When they say if you take this vitamin and this vitamin, this pill. It's not that simple. We did a meta-analysis when we were directors of BrainHealth Institute in Cedars-Sinai, and we did a meta-analysis which they can find from 2018. And what we found was a couple of things. One was that define certain terms that we thought were very difficult to define, such as purpose, are actually at the human level, they're definable. At the individual level, they're definable. This is the thing I wanted to do. This is the activity I wanted to do. This is the activity, the task that I always wanted to do. And we don't do that always. We don't do the exercise where we actually identify those things. Ayesha and I are 2 neurologists, and we have these two teens who are somewhat precocious, and they live with us too. So our dining room is painted with whiteboard paper, so we can write on the walls. And instead of table, we have a ping pong table. Don't ask me about that. But nonetheless, we
pandemic life.
Yeah, regularly defining purpose, which can change from moment to moment. What really drives you around your higher meaning? What really drives you around the thing that makes you happy, and it could make you happy long term? The long term variable are definable things. Quantitative research can be translated into qualitative research. So that's one thing. And as far as complexity, studies have shown that when activities that deal with one domain, be it attention or focus, although there's no way that you can completely isolate, but one domain can completely dominate, right? For example, Sudoku is Still, you're doing executive function, you're still doing language, but it's mostly math dominated. I love it. It's good. For those of you who are into it, please don't hate me. But playing a guitar, you're reading the notes, you're playing, that's language center, the Wernicke's and Broca's. Your dexterity is being challenged with your fingers. Oh, you got to see me. I'm lucky I haven't broken many fingers every time. You're actually processing it creatively. That's your frontal lobe. You're visually processing it. It's occipital lobe. You're being dexterous and coordinated. That's your cerebellum. You're emotionally involved. That's your limbic centers. That's not Sudoku. That's your brain on fire. That's your brain being challenged at all levels and around something that you always wanted to learn, which was that Beatles song Yesterday, let's say. And I still haven't gotten that, but that's okay. I'm causing damage in my neighborhood, but I'm getting there, yeah. So that complex, and then challenges, if you play the same thing over and over again, if you do the same thing over and over again, it becomes baseline. It actually fires less neurons. And we know that of the 87 billion neurons, they're not always firing, and the level goes down as far as it becomes automatic. It actually goes through your cerebellum. But in order to push to the next level, then it involves the rest of the brain. And that involves everything. So if you're stuck in French with 20 words, that's not enough. Well, it is enough for one trip, but you need more than 20 words if you want to have a conversation. Push it to 30 words, push it to 40 words. So that's what actually then engages the brain. And most importantly, happiness, and this is not in our paper, but in general, is when you have a purpose that you're driving for and you achieve, and that box is checked. That's the dopamine and serotonin working together to create short-term, which is drive, which is dopamine, and long-term ship and wave of happiness and joy, which is the serotonin. Way longer than you wanted, but there.
No, it's what it shows is these are complex neural principles, but simple changes in your life activity can have profound impact on that neural pharmacy. We say that when you say it, it sounds different than when we say it, but it's the same story, right? It's not rocket science, but it is neuroscience.
It is.
Beautifully stated, yes.
Yeah. So it's so simple changes in your life can make a profound impact on your brain. And Sandy talks about another complex task that hits all those buttons. Think of someone in your life that you maybe have a disagreement with or a different view. Find a way to show them some compassion and then go through it and actually share that with them. That also checks all those boxes.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's a good kind of segue, because there is a question about, Charlie was asking just about aspects of your social interactions and the importance of socialization. So can you talk to that and the role that plays in our brain health?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we've realized the importance of socialization and that human connection for our brain health during the pandemic, because we saw the bad side of it more often, unfortunately. Socialization is a complex term because it involves elements that are individually studied, and when they're put together, they're just termed as social interaction. So when we're socially interacted, we're conversing more, we're listening more, we are more, we have more motor involvement, whether it's getting up and walking and talking. There's more emotion, hopefully positive emotion involved into it. There is a sense of comfort knowing that you are connected with another human being, which takes care of a lot of these small base anxieties that we have. So it's a really potent medicine for the brain. And when people are socially engaged, or when they belong to a community, they tend to live longer. They tend to have lower risk of Alzheimer's disease and neurodegeneration because of the constant activity in the brain. And the social networking and the support that they get from everyone else also pushes them towards healthier habits, eating better, moving more, sleeping better, and getting rid of anxiety and depression, which is a major, major risk for Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So it's critical to be socially engaged. Yes, absolutely.
Were those specific components ticked off in the Nun study you mentioned? Because I hear what you just said, and it seems to fit. It's a different kind of social network, but it's a very tight network. They have a ton of purpose. They're constantly giving to others. Was that part of that?
Yes, it was. I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the factors for that cognitive resilience that the nuns had were their involvement in the community. You know, the nuns that were more out there speaking with people and connected with the community did so much better than the nuns who were hermits, who stayed away from everyone and didn't really connect socially.
Interesting.
Great. Okay, so now I have this multiple questions right here, but all related. So the very first chart that you showed with the MCI, dementia, and then the green line of health. Okay, so here's the first part of the question is that really achievable that we can go up? Second, can a person in their 70s, and so you can figure out how to answer these together perhaps, can somebody who's in their 70s still change their odds just by making lifestyle changes, or is there a point when it's too late? So if there is a point, should people start midlife? Should they even start younger? And does there ever come a point where the efforts that we're putting in end up being, the reward is not there? I'll leave it at that. Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful questions.
Wonderful question. So the curves that I showed there, we are very, very much science-based. And when we do extrapolate beyond the data, we really say that this is extrapolation, but we have a strong feeling for it. One of the things we said in our book, one of the few extrapolations was that more than 90% of Alzheimer's can be prevented potentially if optimal life is started early enough. But we went out of our way, almost apologetically, saying that this is at the very optimal, and it's an extrapolation. And it's very important that people say that, and I love the way that Steve, where did the data come from? The data has to be said, and the validity of the data. So wonderful. And although we can't increase the curve continuously and increase it, but the data shows that at any age, we can actually increase language, increase focus, and definitely maintain cognitive health significantly. And you can definitely change the normal curve of decline that takes place significantly. Those curves were an exaggeration, but the directions of them, or the fact that the separation of them were not. And that's important. It's important for people to know that if we don't take care of diet, especially with the way we are eating, if we don't take care of exercise or movement and stress and sleep, the brain will succumb, because this brain was not intended to live past 30 or 40, reproduction, and there we go. But now we want to live much healthier and longer, and we can do that by giving the brain resilience. That speaks to the next part of it. The brain's ability to connect is incredible. So people usually compare the brain to a muscle. The biggest person let's say Schwarzenegger at his peak. I don't even know my muscle terms, but let's say that's the case. He's 3 times bigger than he could have been. Not true, probably not, maybe twice. Let's say 3 times, somebody can be 3 times. But let's look at neurons. We have 87 billion neurons or so. Every day that number is challenged here and there, but it's about 80 to 90 billion neurons. Each of them can make a few connections, or as many as 30,000 connections. Now, all neurons don't make 30,000 connections, but the ratios are that big. It's not twice as big, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. And those connectivity, that process of connectivity is actually available to us at any age, at any time. The third part of that question is that true for everybody? And is there a cost benefit point? And that's an important one. Some people are making claims that once a person has Alzheimer's, fulminant Alzheimer's, they can reverse it. They've written books about it, and we're not going to name names. It's extremely irresponsible, because with those books come vitamin concoctions and selling, and you have these holes that need to be filled, and we're not going to. No vitamins are going to reverse Alzheimer's. No pill is going to reverse Alzheimer's. No exercise is going to reverse fulminant Alzheimer's. There have been some studies that at early stages, you can slow it down with significant lifestyle. But even there, we actually have a conversation with our patients saying the cost benefit. To make that kind of lifestyle change, I mean, I'd love people to go more plants, more exercise, but to make that kind of a lifestyle change for a person that's already going through a tremendous amount of anxiety with early dementia, is the cost benefit there? That conversation should be had. So it's such an important question you asked, because a lot of people are making promises that are irresponsible are not just extrapolation, they're just falsehoods.
So, okay, so there was a couple questions people were asking, like, because there are so many things that we can do to fully appreciate the complexity of the brain and the whole system, as interconnected as it is. And you made a point, or maybe it wasn't, we were talking before, but just about how unhealthy a lot of lifestyles are or can be. So when we see these kinds of recommendations, and if somebody is really like, I don't even know where to start, because like this all sounds good, but it's not practical for me, but I'm scared, and so I want to do something, because I also think fear is very strong motivator sometimes for people. What are like the 2 or 3 things that, of everything that you've talked about, what are the 2 or 3 things that you're like, if you would start here, you would at least be on a good path forward?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think maybe I'll start, and then I'll hand it over to you. I think it's important for people to understand that the first step towards better brain health is to know where they are in that journey. We're all on a journey. Some of us are ahead, and some of us are catching up. But to understand and have a very good understanding and evaluation of your situation, your lifestyle at this particular moment is the first step. So, we have different stages of moving forward in a particular journey. There's stages of pre-contemplation where you're not even aware of what you need to do, and then contemplation, and then awareness, and then action, and then maintenance. So figuring out where you are in that journey, and from all of the factors that we talked about, whether it's nutrition, exercise, stress, sleep, and optimizing cognitive activity, picking the one that is the easiest and is the most available is the best thing to do, because every habit is connected to another habit. If you get really good at one thing, it's actually going to seep into other behaviors as well. For example, for most of our, for the community members and patients that we work with, we ask them to just take a morning walk. 5 minutes of morning walk is one of the best things you can do for your brain health, because you're going to expose to daylight. Your sleep cycle is going to get, properly aligned. You're going to get some physical activity. You're going to reduce your stress. And if you create that habit of 5 minutes of morning walk, you probably will be able to change some other things too. So that would be a good answer.
Beautiful.
To begin with.
No, I there's no way that I can add. That's beautiful. I mean, achievable goals around your journey. That's critical. And I'll go one step even. Listen to organizations like yours, because there's so many people, talking heads out there, saying a spectrum of things that are from extremely unhealthy to health. So if it has to be science-based, it has to be data-driven, it has to be consensus-driven. A center like yours, which is very, they're held by standards.
Absolutely.
You can't just make up things. So that's important. I hope that they see us in the same way as well. We're at Loma Linda, we lead the Brain Institute, and we're held by certain standards that we can't extrapolate. We can't say outlandish things just because it's shiny and it's going to get attention on social media. And once you decide what is the optimal, that's not where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to take one of those things. Let's say food. Ayesha brought the best one. Exercise was a morning walk, which resets everything. Adding greens, 2 servings of greens to your diet for 1 month, and until it becomes habit. Then you can go to the next thing. And then, by the way, every time you do a positive behavior, check it off somewhere. Feel good about it. Own it. We are that mechanical system. Stimulus, behavior, reward. You have to create that system in your life. And slowly you'll see that these habits just start stacking on each other until it becomes this wave of behavior that becomes you.
Terrific.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
What are you, I mean, we're, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're like kind of close to getting to the end of the hour. What is the thing that either both of you together or separately are most excited about the future? Like where do you see what is the thing in the future that you see as the most promising or exciting?
I'll say mine and you say yours?
Yes, ma'am.
Or you want to start?
No, go ahead.
All right. For me, it is involvement of the community. the disbursement of information into the community so everyone becomes a brain health ambassador. I'm really excited about that. Of course, I'm excited about the science part and about the concept of epigenetics and all the fantastic research that is going on in the world. I mean, we both did our share of very wonky science, whether it was NIH, UCSD, and Columbia University, whether it was functional MRI or the genetics of Alzheimer's disease, and so on and so forth. But the thing that excites us is being able to disperse objective evidence-based information into communities and to see people taking that and going with it and dispersing it into their communities. We've seen such massive response in that realm.
And mine is doing what she said with her well into my 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond.
That is awesome.
It really is. And it's we talk about translating the science into something practical. And y'all have done that tonight. I mean, just fabulously, right? Because these are complex issues. You made them real. I love that people understand, they're just aware that there are so many environmental factors that contribute or hurt their brain health, contribute to or hurt it. And we stress that. I love it, hearing very similar direction from a completely different lens. It adds credibility. Part of our mission is to be an integrator of thought partners and awareness. So like you said, Ayesha, it should just become what we all talk about. We kind of know what it means to be heart healthy. Absolutely. Let's make sure we're all having that conversation in the community, because one of my hypotheticals for our Brain Health Project is, can we prove that just little micro nudges on a periodic basis can change people's brain health over time?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of cheating, because we know, like you said, it feeds other good habits. So that's the whole point. Once you start that journey, it gets easier.
Absolutely. Beautifully stated.
So listen, thank you both so much. I am inspired. I'm thrilled. I want to thank our audience. Again, remind them that we're going to take a little bit of a break before the fall. And just so y'all are aware, Dean and Ayesha, I don't know if you know this, we now have 54,000 new followers who've come to Brain Health Presents over the past 2 years. 31,000 this year alone. So thank you to the audience.
Yes.
Thank you to Jen for always being such a great moderator for this. And we're going to throw up a QR code, because we are about the research. There are studies that are consistently ongoing here. And there are 2 Brain Health Project studies related to Alzheimer's. This is the QR code that brings you to participate in a study here. And it's important. You heard Dean and Ayesha talk about it. This is part of bringing translation to the community, but having the community participate in the science. We want a diverse community to participate. We want the underserved to trust, not distrust the science, be part of the solution. So please, if you have an interest, scan the code and become part of the study. Dean and Ayesha cannot thank you enough. And we're on our brain health journey together. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. It's wonderful to be connected with you all.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.